So, I could be talking about the basically massive cheating that's going to be occurring coming up. All the prepping they're doing, saying it's, oh, there's a red mirage, or oh, the military actually supports Biden. We all know that's crap, and we know the Democrats are going to do their typical ballot harvesting and mail-in voter fraud and just other insanity, busing people in from out of state. If you don't believe me, just go talk to some people who actually locally handle the polls and whatnot, and talk to particularly if you talk to independents watching what's going on. It's a mess. It's not always the same. I mean, there are definitely districts where Republicans cheat and they're part of the same corrupt group, but it's a major Democrat thing. Razorfist just did a really good video about mail-in ballots, and he spoke specifically about the issues that basically Arizona had and how essentially they got a blue senator for the first time in like 50 years. How'd that happen? Well, they cheated. Same exact way Al Franken got in. It's just basically wait till the results, and if you don't like the results on election night, then you basically magically find the ballots you need to then put things over the edge. There's a lot at play. They're setting up to try to kind of do the same stuff. Do I think they'll do it to benefit Biden? No, I don't think so. I don't think they want Biden, because Biden will be a disaster even if they let him in. But what they would want is they want them Senate seats, because if they get the Senate seats, they may not even need the House. So basically, House passes articles of impeachment on January 19th, right? And they hand it over to the new Senate that comes in, that's blue now, on January 20th. What happens? Well, Trump and Pence and all those special people are removed. They get what they want anyway, and they get a big dramatic scene, and it's a constitutional crisis, right? That would be the big play. If I were Democrats right now, and I was going to keep up with the cheating stuff, and I really didn't want to get caught, I would just concede the fact that it's over for presidential elections, effectively over. You know what I mean? So I would surrender, and I would just say, oh, look, we can't win the presidential election because, even though we've got our supporters thinking that, like, most people agree with us, we know from basically the polling and just from the sheer enthusiasm gap that we're going to get absolutely crushed. Plus, Biden's got dementia. We really probably shouldn't be putting him in charge of the nuclear button in the first place. That might be a huge mistake, right? But what they can do is they can basically, oh, these mail-in ballots came in and they all voted for Trump. Look at this Trump landslide. But they also voted in some, House members and some Democrat, senators and whatnot. They're going to say, oh, you're going to delegitimize these Trump voters and make it just that much harder to... If I was cheating, that's what I'd be doing. And if I wasn't cheating, that's still where I'd spend my money, because they've effectively lost the presidential election. They've lost it. Because now they're screwed. If they debate Trump, Biden's got dementia. I mean, did you hear him just answering a question from, like, Peter Ducey? Like, he couldn't even do that. It was, like, during his, like, first press conference in months. Him rambling on in Pittsburgh in his speech, just saying completely incoherent things. That stuff's going to stack up, and he's doing it every single time he goes out. It used to be like the occasional thing. You'd have to, like, one interview would just be dumb and cheesy, but, he would have his goofy smile and stuff, but you couldn't really say maybe he's just a weird guy. But now it's pretty much every time he goes out in public, he has these moments where he just either just babbles incoherently or stares off into space or just doesn't understand something, seems confused, calls things the wrong name. The man's not well. Part of me wants to feel bad for him, and I think on a human level I do. But at the same time, he wants the power, and he was willing to basically prostitute himself to the Democrats to get his shot. So seeing him kind of humiliated, I'm just like, well, he did bring it upon himself. But at least, he wants to do it. As for the people who are enabling him doing it, that's where the real evil is, The Podesta, the people who convince, yeah, you're going to run, you're going to do this, and you're winning, and these are the things you need to do. Just hide in the basement. You'll be fine. No, you don't have dementia. Those people, yeah, they're exploiting this guy. Anyway, that's my first 4 minutes just talking about the cheating that's coming up, because it's coming up. I say just watch Razorfist's video and then just dig deeper from there. I'm not going to be able to cover kind of every little detail on what's going on with that, but it's going to be bad, so, keep your eyes open. And, watch the articles. They're prepping you. They're prepping you. They're going to tell you, oh, the military actually supports Biden. Oh, this demographic's going to break for Biden unexpectedly. Like, oh, the red mirage, right? Like, they're prepping you. They're trying to plant the seed. Basically, inception. They're trying to plant the seed to say when they suddenly come up with a bunch of blue ballots, 2-3 weeks later and start flipping some seats, they can say, oh, well, we did say this was going to happen because, Don't buy it. Don't buy it. And if you can volunteer as a poll watcher, do. You know. And also push for voter ID. It's about time, right? All right, anyway. What I'm actually making this video about is, it has somewhat to do with voter fraud, and it has a lot to do with basically the corporatism that plagues this country and many, many other countries. Short definition of corporatism. Corporatism is essentially when it's not even directly related to capitalism, because it can actually occur in socialist states as well, where even the or fascistic states where the government doesn't own necessarily all the means of production, and they may have complete authoritarian control, but it can still happen within a country. Like it still happens in China, basically, like a major manufacturing sector. Yeah, okay, they're all under direct control and ownership of the CCP, but the people there, they're the ones who got the money to bribe the people. So, like, wherever there's power and money to be spread around, it basically, corporatism can form. But our system used to be actually pretty damn resistant to corporatism until Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson is probably the worst president we had in U.S. history in terms of the amount of damage he did to the United States culturally, and with the laws, and with the I don't know what the people were smoking in basically the 1910s. Maybe something had to do with something with World War One, or maybe I don't know. I don't know what people were thinking back in the 1910s, but they were definitely not acting American. Let's just say. 3 major amendments passed, as well as another piece of legislation I'm going to point out. Income tax. Yeah, we function just fine with that in income tax. And now the state can say, oh, your labor, we're entitled to a certain amount of that. That's theft. I mean, really, that is theft. There used to be essentially taxes used to be collected through commerce. There'd be a commerce tax, basically. Hey, if you're doing business here, basically you pay the fee, you pay the percentage. Import-export tax. Things thrived under that. That's where you get basically, that's why America expanded the way as quickly as it did. And they didn't have any sort of revenue problem. They just thought, oh, the income tax, that's going to be fair. And it starts off really low, and then what happens, it's higher and higher and higher. And by the time you got FDR, he's like, oh yeah, it's going to be like 90 on the top wage earner, because that's not fair. And then you have things like basically, of course that's not going to work. So when that doesn't work, they have to have now tax loopholes, and they have to have write-offs and stuff, right? And then you'll see situations like there was in the 50s where it was like, oh my God, 90% top percentile income tax, right? Except for the fact that, well, no, because if you put your money in a corporation, well, that tax structure is different, and then you can expense things out. It's the thing that started the insanely complex tax code that everybody says benefits the rich, but it's like it's the income tax. That's where the BS started. You get rid of that, and you get rid of basically the government's ability to just like reach into your pocket, and after you work, and then somebody pays you, and then they reach into your pocket and take it from you. If you remove the government's ability to do that to you, and do that really to anybody, all of a sudden, you're gonna have a lot more control of your wallet. You're gonna have a lot more money being on the bottom. Your dollar and your labor is worth a lot more, because it's not just being skimmed. They complain, oh my God, hedge fund managers, they get a certain, well, they have write-offs, because if you're taking a risk, and you're risking a certain amount of money in, and you get a certain amount of money back, they basically, if you made 5% back, and then automatically the government's going to be shaving 90% of your profit off, are you going to move that kind of money around? No. And then the market crashes. So they carve out loopholes of that for that, so that the market keeps working. And that's why this whole top-heavy tax code, and that's why no matter what kind of tax break there is, they always say, oh, the rich are benefiting more, because you can always move the numbers around. And guess what? The corporations, they don't care that much, because they have the lawyers, like the big guys. They don't care that much, because they got the lawyers and stuff. They're not going anywhere. They'll figure out the tax code. But the small guys, the competitors, the medium-sized people, the middle class, the small businesses that employ most people, well, they can't afford to have the lawyers and the accountants basically to dodge the tax code. So they're getting ripped off 100%. Basically they're always missing opportunities to basically save money from Uncle Sam coming and taking it. $1 million isn't a lot of money when you're employing 100 people. It's really not. And they want to say, oh, that's a millionaire business. We got to take a percentage of that. No, stop that crap. Base it on consumption, base it on import, export, that kind of stuff. Go back to the way it used to be. That'll clear up a lot of these tax things, and then nobody will be able to say, oh my God, the rich are benefiting. No, because everybody will be playing by the same rules. Income tax, majorly, we have a screwed up tax code and this disaster, and they want to talk about income inequality and tax balances and all this other stuff. Boom. That's called 16th Amendment. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. Should have never been there. And it's just really funny that this is one of those problems that bureaucracy and the Democrats literally created back in July 1909. Was that when it was ratified? No, this one was proposed. So it was ratified on February 3rd, 1913, right? Dems did that, and now they're still bitching about the consequences of that. They're saying, well, you know what the solution is? Even more income tax. No. The solution is get rid of the income tax and go back to the way it was before. Because in your attempts to try to make things more fair, you created a nightmarish tax code that made things unfair. Why did wealth disparities start splitting over time more and more and more? Well, you can thank the income tax. Like, hello, we know where this started. We can just go and just, axe this thing, and then that would fix a lot of the problems. It would fix the complaints we have, and everybody be playing by the same set of rules, and then you wouldn't have to, lobby to manipulate the tax code because the tax code is just based on consumption. Then you don't have to worry about these corporate tax cuts and all this other crap. You don't have to worry about any of that. You get rid of the income tax, you get rid of the corporate tax, basically you just get rid of it, just everybody gets to keep their money, and you're only taxed on the consumption. Now it's fair, Now it's fair, You can't be, But what's the point of lobbying? You're going to bring down the cost of what? Oh, you don't want them getting tax breaks? Well, just don't make the government entitled to your income, and then suddenly people don't have to manipulate to get tax breaks. It's stupidly simple, but it's that is the source of a lot of these grievances that they have, and I just shake my head when I hear Sanders supporters and people like AOC who just want to make the tax code even more complicated, and they want to basically slay the job creators, slay the business owners, and slay these large corporations, which I'm not a huge fan of. But at least they employ people. At least they do stuff. They want to just they want to basically cut the throat of the golden goose and then say, hey, we're helping. It's like, no. How about you just let people keep their money? No matter how big and how small, you just let people keep their money. You want to see price of goods go down? You want to see actual, prosperity? Get rid of the income tax. All right, that's the 16th Amendment. Now, 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment, of all the amendments, if I could nuke one from orbit, it would be the 17th Amendment. Because the 17th Amendment is the source of the bureaucracy and the corruption and the lobbying that we have. What do I mean by that? Well, you got to know what the 17th Amendment is. 17th Amendment, that created the direct election of senators by the states. Who the hell's idea was that? I know what the state houses were thinking when they basically voted to pass this. It's the dumbest idea ever. Because now you wonder why these dinosaurs are in the Senate forever and they never go away, right? Because they're elected by popular vote within the state. You can have somebody like John McCain or Hillary Clinton move into a state and stay there for whatever the minimum, or basically own a piece of property for the minimum of 5 years. And these people are already wealthy, right? So that's not that hard, right? And then come right out of the White House or come right out of the whatever political bullshit they're doing, not be from the state, and then immediately, because of money being dumped in from the outside, get elected by the populace who are just like, oh, I like this person. You want to see something exacerbates the two-party system? You want to see a third-party senator possibly ever getting elected? Well, guess what? You get rid of the direct election of senators, then you might actually see those things. Because the way the senators used to be picked is that the state houses would pick them. So your local representative, that one you have the most influence on, the one that, doesn't go to Washington, they're from your town, they're your neighbor, the one that you could actually run and win that seat, that's the one. Those are the people who used to choose the senators. So if you want to give third parties a chance at all, and you want to basically you have these complaints about the two-party system. No, the solution is not voting for a libertarian in the or green or whatever in the general election. No, that's not the solution. That does nothing. Oh, show of force, we got 3% this time instead of 1.5%. Yeah, you've done nothing except for probably work against your own interests, because now those votes have gone to somebody. Basically, the person who now benefited from that was the person you liked the least out of the two possible winners. If you want third parties to rise up and you want third parties to actually be a thing, you got to get rid of the direct election of senators. Because what if there's, an independent party or a third party that's maybe, let's pretend things weren't as screwed up as they are now. You've got the Republicans, you've got the Democrats, and you've got, a third party. Let's just make something up. Let's just say the Whigs are back, right? Now, the Republicans control maybe they control 40% of the state house, and then the Democrats, they control about 30% of the state house, and the Whigs, well, they control the rest. They're all in the minority, but the Republicans have the majority, but maybe they don't have the full majority, right? And the Democrats are saying we will never elect a Republican senator to go to Washington, at least not one that is sufficiently Republican, because they're loyalists. And the Whigs can now say, all right, look, we can form a coalition and we can vote for your Republican pick, but we're going to have more influence over who it is. Or maybe the Republicans say, hey, Democrats, they don't have to say they voted for Republican, but we like this Whig guy because he's pretty close to us. He's more like a libertarian type. We agree on a lot of things. Why don't we send one of your guys? We'll endorse one of your guys if you basically form a coalition with us. And then the Democrats can vote for basically comfortably vote for him. Now all of a sudden you've got a third-party senator. And at the very least, you have a third party that actually means something, that is going to have a much, much larger effect on the overall viability. Because, your town, you created the party of Steve, these Democrats suck. Maybe you're in a district that just the Democrat or Republican just runs unopposed forever, right? And it's a state house thing, right? So who cares, right? But now that person's retiring, right? And what if you don't what if you're third party and you just say, hey, well, I'm going to run now and I'm going to campaign, and I only have to campaign in my own little town, my own little state district. And now guess what? That third party and you as actually an individual now have influence over basically the United States Senate. You think you'll get these people being reelected over and over and over and over again? The reason why there's no term limits on the Senate particularly, was because there was no need for term limits because the senators weren't directly elected. Basically, the state houses would be changing composition constantly, right? And 6 years later, you'll be lucky if your party, the same coalition that put you in power as a senator, is even still in charge in your house. And you better be damn good and damn popular for them to basically be able to vote to keep you back in. Because if you're a falling star, or you're somebody who's disagreeable, or you're, or basically, you've done a shitty job and now the state house is flipped to the other party, guess what? You're out. And it makes the Senate basically a lot more volatile in terms of people going in and out. 6-year term is ridiculous for senators that are elected directly. It's ridiculous, and it's a source of a lot of the corruption. Now, lobbying. I did mention lobbying. Why is lobbying now so damn powerful? Well, it's very simple. It's the senators, because no matter how big the state, or how small the state, I should say, you still get 2 senators, right? The senators, they're the ones on the arms committee, basically the intelligence committees, the spending committees. There's a lot. U.S. senators in some ways have more power, can often have more power than the president has in certain areas, right? And we know. So first of all, get rid of directional election of senators. You have less of a chance of somebody being in there perpetually, basically being paid and basically being perpetually corrupt, because their job is not nearly as stable. After those 6 years, odds are they're gone. Because even if they like what they're doing, there's going to be another person within their party who's going to want to step up and might be more popular. Good, right? Also, now you're a corporation, right? And you want these senators to basically craft laws that are going to favor you. Let's pretend the income tax is gone in. It's not even the tax code. Maybe you're doing something like, I think I should be allowed to dump this chemical into the water. I don't think that should be a law, right? And you start bribing and lobbying, right? Well, guess what? You can bribe and lobby that guy all you want, but is he going to be the next senator? You don't know. So you would have to then go and bribe individually every person in towns in the states. You'd have to dump. It would cost so much. If you think it costs money to basically buy a senator now, the amount of money it would cost for them to not only buy the senator, but find the people who are corrupt enough to take the money in enough of a concentration in all these little different state house districts to try to do that. I mean, I would just be impressed if you even could. And it's and then that makes it a local issue. You know, all of a sudden, you know, this candidate rolls in, and it's like, where are they getting this multi-million-dollar advertising campaign? We're like a small house seat in the middle of like bumfuck. What's going on? Guess what? Your town can say, no, we don't like that. You know, we're not. We don't trust you. You. This seems like outside money. How long you been living here? You've been here for 6 months. Like, I don't know you. You know, that you don't send that person to the house. It's that much harder to lobby people to do stuff when you have to now go down to the ground level and try to lobby individual members of state houses just to get. It's that extra level of protection. Founding fathers were brilliant putting that in place because they knew money talks, and they knew popular votes end in disaster often. There's nothing in the U.S. Basically federal government that involves popular vote except for the direct election of U.S. senators, which is where the corruption comes from, which is where you get California pouring money into Arizona's Senate election, right? You get advertisements on the airwaves that go nationally, and they can just, you know, DNC could just dump money wherever they want to go, or RNC could just dump money into whatever states. If you've got to convince now people who are members of houses from state houses who are from like individual like towns and smaller districts, and you got to go convince every one of them to back who you want, who's probably going to be somebody who from the little pool that they're going to select, that's a lot harder to lobby in that case. And it's not that our country was corruption proof, but that was a much, much, much bigger defense than what we have now, which now it's just wide open. Oh, you got millions of dollars? You just got to find a way to launder it to them. If you can do that, you can buy them. And then guess what? They're stuck with them for 6 years, and then you just drop a couple million so that they outraise and out advertise their primary if they even have a challenger, and then for the general. That makes the people with the big money, the big corporations, the big spooky people, the ones that the left always complain about, that makes them a lot less powerful. So you get rid of that 17th Amendment, boom. It's going to clean up a lot of problems. It'll be almost overnight, because every time there's an election, it'll be the state houses taking the picks for the senator. And you can bet your ass there's no more Mitch McConnells, there's no more Lindsey Grahams, there's no more any of these career politicians and senators who you just cannot stand seeing, because they're ideologues, you know, and they're on the take, and you know they're on the take because they've been in Washington for like 40 years, you know. You don't get your Joe Bidens, you don't get all these people that everybody collectively hates, that the Democrats pretend to hate. Bernie Sanders pretends to hate. You don't even get Bernie Sanders. You get just basically fresh people out of the house every 6 years. Maybe they suck, but guess what? They're not going to be there for that long. And then you don't have to even worry about the term limit stuff. That's the solution. I mean, I'm all for term limits, but I would much rather see the 17th Amendment repealed than term limits, because that'll solve the problem completely. Now, 18th Amendment. There's two parts to the 18th Amendment. By two parts, I don't mean literally there's two parts to the 18th Amendment. I mean there's basically there's a major piece of legislation that came about at the same time. 18th Amendment, prohibition and sale and manufacture of alcohol. And also the National Firearms Act basically said, oh, you know, you can't have a gun that's, you know, you can't have an automatic, you can't have a gun that's too quiet or too long or too short. And it just basically made the federal government be able to say, okay, you know, we can dictate what kind of arms you're allowed to have. That was the NFA. That does violate the Second Amendment. It really does. But you got to remember, also, so does, you know, it seems completely unconstitutional to ban the, you know, manufacturing and sale of alcohol, and they just went out of their way to get a constitutional amendment for it. You know, the people who were basically fighting the NFA, I guess they were kind of glad that an amendment wasn't passed that got rid of the Second Amendment, you know, because that very well could have happened, because it wasn't until basically the 21st Amendment did the 18th get repealed. And you got to remember, this is the Democrats who pushed this. This is the, you know, the progressive era, you know, the ones that everybody says, oh yeah, forward thinking. It's like they banned the manufacture sale of alcohol because they said, oh, you know, men get violent when they get drunk, so let's fix the problem by just saying nobody drinks, ignoring, you know, the underlying problems that actually cause these things, and ignoring basically the idea that I mean, it's kind of funny. You could smoke pot at the time, but you couldn't drink. It's a mess. So the government basically starts saying, okay, it's our job to look out for your well-being for the decisions you make. It's not our job to look for external threats. We're going to now police your lives. And we've been feeling, even though we repealed the 18th Amendment, we've been feeling the effects of that since. You know, why do you think pot's not illegal? Why do you think the drug war is even a thing? Well, guess what? Because the government got in their head that they can mandate what you can stick in your body. You know, We did. The 18th was repealed, but really the concept of the 18th has not been repealed. They're still telling you what you can do, and whether you can basically try drugs, and if you're like your doctor prescribes it, but oh no, that medication's not tested yet, so you can't do that. Like, you have no control over this. Like the FDA and all these other groups like have to like stand there and be like, okay, we're gonna monitor this. Why? It's your ass on the line. If you're wrong, you did it to yourself. I'm not saying like people should just be able to like binge stuff over the counter that's prescription, but the government's got no business, and they just don't have the resources, time, or mind to micromanage every single person's prescriptions, every single doctor, every single set of experiments that people want to do. It's not worth it. The Operation Warp Speed with these vaccines, they're going to basically have them ready by the end of the year, and they're like, oh yeah, at minimum this would be 3 years. And it's like, well, why? Oh, it's just the red tape. It's not because the vaccines are being rushed. It's just because the FDA is so, they're so slow. Everything's got to go through all these processes, and instead of having essentially almost like the way a free market works, which is like the way Bitcoin works, where it's like, oh, you check the work, and it's all these handshakes after another, and that's and the quality and the basically the liability you take on is how you guarantee the quality and root out what's bad and what's not. It doesn't always work. Sometimes things break down, but in general, you have this FDA who's just like, no, put the brakes on. We're going to determine. I mean, it's really funny. You'll hear people complain, and they'll say, oh my God, the drug companies are keeping away the cancer treatments. Oh, really? Are they? Because if you're a drug company and you're going to put together a new cancer treatment that's going to somehow cure cancer or something, right? Do you know how many millions of dollars and how much time that's going to take versus just basically finding cheaper ways to manufacture the drugs you currently manufacture? Follow the money, I mean, big pharma, they're not saints or anything, but but if you incentivize them inventing new things and get the hell out of their way, people will do that. Someone will say, hey, I'm going to go cure this, and I'm going to invest a certain amount in it, and the FDA is not going to be up my ass. I'm not going to have to do hundreds of millions of dollars. Think if you're a small pharmaceutical developer, right? You're a doctor, a small research firm. You're just a couple of guys in a lab, and maybe whatever this disease is better than anyone else could ever possibly know. And you've got your own chemists, and you got your own pharmaceutical studies and all this other stuff, right? Do you have the money to then produce your own treatment? Can you do that? No, you can't self-fund it. Why? Because you can't afford the attorneys, and you can't afford the paperwork that you would need from the FDA. So then what do? You go either ask for a government grant, which you probably won't get because government they pick whatever safe bets are usually, or you have to sell out essentially to a larger pharmaceutical company that's now going to basically either buy your thing and then say, oh, will we make money off it? Odds are no. Okay, maybe we're going to sideline it, and now you've lost that technology. But you reduce this stuff, all of a sudden now people can take risks on their own. People can sink and float on their own, and you have smaller developers, and you've got way more experimentation. So, just wanted to talk about those because I don't think they're talked about enough, and I think a lot of people on the particularly moderate left, and they're kind of disgusted with everything, right? And they it's like the tax stuff is bad, and income inequality is bad, and all these other things. It's like, yeah, I understand what you're saying. But the solutions to that is not more government. It's to get rid of basically the fundamental problems. We've stuck the stick in our own spokes, and every time we hit it, and we're like, "Ow, that hurts." And why does this keep getting worse? Well, it's because of that. It's not sticking another spoke in there to even it out is not gonna. It's another stick in the spoke to even it out is not gonna fix the problem. It's just gonna shift it. Same with Social Security, right? It's a pyramid scheme. And what do? They just keep kicking that can until, and by the grace of God, we've been growing big enough to keep up with it. But at a certain point, that's going to pop. I don't, in my lifetime, I don't expect to see Social Security. I'm going to be honest, I don't. And I wouldn't vote to say, oh yeah, keep it. I'm entitled to it because I think it's a screw up. And I think at some point, people one of our generations is going to have to eat it. And if it's mine, it's mine. Because if I pass that buck down to my kids' basically my kids or in this case my nephew's generation, do I want them to have to deal with that bigger bubble and be in a worse situation? No. I mean, and I know I didn't cause the problem, but it's like something's got to be done at some point. This dam will break, and we keep screwing with stuff. I mean, just look at the amendments when the progressives are in charge. I don't know why they don't teach teach you this stuff in schools anymore. They're like, oh, FDR, he was amazing. No. Well, let me see. Well, let me go down. What are the good amendments? Let's see. The first 10. 11's pretty good. Procedure having president and vice president elected together. Yeah, 12th was good because vice president's office was pretty useless otherwise. 13th was obviously very good because it got rid of slavery and involuntary servitude. 14th was good because it messed with the due process. It was basically post-Civil War stuff. 15th was the same thing basically. You can't deny people a right to vote because the race or whatever. It basically had to do with slaves and stuff. Like they were trying to. Basically the Democrats in the South were trying to argue like, okay, well they're free now, but they're not Americans. They weren't born free, so like their kids will be fine, but they won't be fine. It's just because they didn't want to lose power in the short term, and basically the rest of the country was like, no, all right, you want us to put that in that. First of all, that's a stupid argument, but if you need us to put it in writing legally, we will, and that's what the 15th is. But then, 16th, scrap it, income tax. 17th, establish direct election of senators, throw that in a fire and bury it to never be found again. 18th, we actually did nuke it, but it still set a precedent, and we're still stuck with the NFA and the gun laws that passed, around that same era. Yeah, thanks Wilson. Thanks, Democrats. You want to know why pot's not legal? It's because of the Democrats. It's not the Republicans. The Democrats. They're the ones who basically set that bullshit in motion, and we're still reaping it because the government didn't used to have that power, and now they do. 19th, denial of right to vote based on sex. That one makes sense as well. That obviously, women are voting. There is a certain amount of logic to the property owners voting. Basically, in other words, you have to have skin in the game. It'd be essentially, basically you have to have a certain amount of ownership to be able to vote. Essentially, how you're going to be taxed. Now, I think that necessarily essentially evaporated because property now means it used to mean land, and that used to be kind of the core of things, and also it'd be like, oh well, that one household, one vote. That makes sense, right? Until your sons grow up and then they have their own households, and then that's one vote. Obviously that's not how things are structured anymore, but there was some logic based on that. And then obviously the 19th came about. It was like, well, if you're gonna be doing that and basically getting rid of the whole property structure thing, then why women can be the independents in an independent household. There's no reason, like, okay, you got to count twice the amount of votes, whatever. Like you can't deny them the right because they're just as autonomous as men. That makes sense legally. I know it's like, oh, I'm trying to justify women voting. It's like, well, yeah, but you have to actually have some understanding about the way things were the way they were in order to really actually make your case for why it should be changed. You can't just scream sexism. That doesn't, that's not why it was implemented. I mean, is it a sexist result? Yeah. I mean, it's not. It wasn't a good result, but it wasn't implemented strictly because screw women. That's not what it was about. It was about the family unit. So whatever. Let's see, 20th. Let me see. Change the date terms for president, vice president, members. Okay, yeah, they moved it. I forget what the deal is with that. 32. I forget. I think that was actually. I forget what the reason is. Basically, it's just extended someone's term out a couple months because the transition used to be, I think it actually used to be in October or something. That was when the government transitioned over, and they just changed it to the 20th, so the end of January. Not a big deal. 21st repeals the 18th. Yeah, obviously that was a good move. I wish they had also repealed the NFA. I wish the 21st just rewrote the Second Amendment again. I said, yeah, we just want to reaffirm that this crap's still violating it. 22nd, limit the number of times a person can be elected president. Well, that was because basically it was turning into a dynasty with Roosevelt. I think that's probably was a good idea. And again, president that used to be elected by the House. It wasn't direct elected. First George Washington was voted in by a smaller group. But, okay, popular vote for the executive. That's fine. Maybe don't give the executive so much power, and that won't be that much of an issue, right? Cool. So, limits the amount of terms. That makes sense. You don't want that going on forever. I mean, could you imagine I'm trying to think somebody who was super popular. Could you imagine Obama constantly? You'd want to just it would be a problem. 23rd, grants District of Columbia electors in the Electoral College. That's a mistake. No, District of Columbia should not get any electors. District of Columbia should be a federal city, an autonomous federal city, that is just for the seat of the federal government, because all you're doing is you're saying, oh, the seat of power now has an extra little bit of influence. You're just asking for corruption. So 23rd, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Oh, we want D.C. to be a state. No, screw you. D.C. is not a state. It's the federal seat of power, and giving it any more basically incentive to be corrupt is ridiculous. You don't need to live in D.C. All right, if you're running the federal government, go ahead, live in D.C. But that's the place where the people with like the power, the corrupting ring, you guys don't need any more power. You are D.C. You're inherently powerful because you're basically the seat of the throne. So you don't need your electoral college things. You don't need to dictate to the other states. It's stupid. So D.C. get rid of that. Get rid of the 23rd Amendment. 24 prohibits the revocation of voting rights due to non-payment of poll taxes. I didn't know that was that was back in the 60s. I thought they had gotten rid of that even sooner. Well, yeah, obviously you don't want a poll tax. Addresses accession to the president, established procedures for filling vacancies. The vice president responded. Okay, so that was just a succession change from what the original was on the 25th. That's for the mental illness stuff. Okay, well, they really should have probably implemented that back with during Wilson's term, because he was just in a coma for the end of his last 2 years of his time in office, and his wife signed all his papers. So the first lady. So there's actually probably a lot of laws that were signed that are just not valid because they were signed by the first lady back in the Wilson era. They should. I wonder if anybody could take that to court and legally challenge them and say, hey, that's this has clearly been a forgery, and I don't care. It's been on the record for 110 years. It doesn't matter. Throw it out. That'd be really cool. Hey, maybe I'm not sure when the NFA was passed, right? But maybe there's some BS gun laws we can push the technicality on. And be like, hey, yeah, Congress voted for it, but the president didn't sign it. It was his wife. That's silly, but that makes sense. You do have to have some sort of accountability. Let's see. 26 prohibits the denial of right of U.S. citizens 18 years or older to vote on account of age. Was the voting age lowered? Huh. I guess it must have been higher. It's kind of funny. It's I'm really familiar with the Bill of Rights, but it's all these extra stuff. It's you realize you're man, there was an amendment passed on May 5th, 1992. Delays law affecting congressional salary from taking effect until after the next election of representatives. So basically, you can't just vote yourself. But here's the thing, right? Would that even be a problem if there wasn't direct election of senators? You wouldn't need the 27th. That'd be great. This is kind of funny. It's they have this crap. Whatever. Actually, no, 17. What was that? Hold on, 1 minute. Proposed 17. Completed 92. What the hell does that mean? Honestly, I've never really looked at the 27th, but I know that messes with the whatever congressional pay or whatever it is. Again, another problem that can be avoided by just getting rid of the 17th. Get rid of the 17th. That should be. I hope President Trump should run on that. And the thing is the Republicans are kind of cowards. Just because if you propose the 17th, guess what that means? Ted Cruz isn't surviving. I mean, I like Ted Cruz, but he's not surviving that. Rand Paul's not surviving that, probably. Mitch McConnell's not surviving that. Lindsey Graham's not surviving that. All this, because you get rid of direct elections of senators, you get rid of a lot of the basically established people in Congress. I should say in the Senate at least. And, it's kind of hard to ask them to give up the reins, but that should be the next big movement. Let's get rid of the 17th. You want to see corruption get rooted out? Get rid of the 17th, because now your investment in lobbying and trying to buy people off, there's no guarantee. It makes basically it de-incentivizes corruption because you get less return for your dollar. Think about that. It turns out there's a market solution to more things than just economic. Deny incentive to power. Well, guess what? It's going to be a lot easier to root out corruption, and it's going to be a lot more corruption resistant. So whatever. That's my really long talking about basically the amendments to the Constitution and why the 17th and the 16th and the 18th they can just and the 23rd too. They can just, they just need to go away. Go away. Get rid of that crap.